Hey everyone, so this is part two of our projector demos. So I'm going to discuss what are lumens and contrast ratio. These are two very important values that you might see on a projector. So let's just get into it. Lumens is a standardized measurement of brightness that a projector emits. So also sometimes you might see this ANSI lumens listed. So ANSI means the American National Standards Institute, which I guess is an institute that provides standards for such things. And then contrast ratio is a measurement of the ratio of light reflected off the projection surface, so like a screen or a wall or whatever, from an all-white image versus an all-black image. So you usually would see contrast ratio listed as something like this. So if you saw a value of 3,000 to 1, that means the white image is 3,000 times brighter than the black image. If you recall, in part one, I was showing my kind of old projector, and even the black parts of the image are kind of gray because it's just the contrast ratio is fairly low with that. So a really high value means that blacks will be very black and whites will be very white. There's a large contrast between the image. So just thinking about that, I looked up a few projectors at maybe 4 different price points, going from really cheap to obscenely expensive. So let's look at some of these and try to understand what these values mean. So this first one, this is Pico projectors. I've seen some of our students get these. It's really cute, really tiny, very portable. Affordable, $399. So it is listed at only 200 lumens. What does it say? Right at 200 lumens. And it compares that with some other really tiny portable projectors here. So here's some other models. So you can see the Sony one got 40, 50. That's like so dim. It's very, very dim. This JBL one, slightly higher. And we can see they have this little thing here, the difference between 50 to 200. I mean, all of these, it's very, very low. It's not very bright at all. And so strangely though, contrast, I was looking all over. I could not find any listing for contrast ratio for the Pico. There was a FAQ somewhere, and it was just saying contrast ratio is something that's important for projectors, but it didn't actually list it at all. So I'm thinking the contrast ratio for this is probably very, very low. And actually we can kind of see, contrast ratio really matters how dark the room is also. So if there's any light in the room, obviously you're not going to get true black because the light in the room is going to cast on that surface. But if you imagine if you had a completely 100% pitch dark room, a projector with a bad contrast ratio listing, the black area, it's still going to project kind of grayish. It's not actually going to be black. So let's look at the next level up. Epson. So this would be, kind of cheap, portable. This next level might be a kind of consumer model, home cinema. And I'm just kind of picking these at random. There's so many options. So this one we see it's 3,300 lumens. So that's a lot more. And where does it list? Dynamic contrast ratio up to 16,000 to 1 for rich detail in dark scenes. So that's pretty good. So really, I'm not buzz marketing. I wasn't paid by any of these companies to buzz market to you. But I would say, for an extra $200, the difference in quality between these two things is like huge, right? Like 200 lumens versus 3,300. Pretty good, like very good contrast ratio. So I would say $600 is a pretty good deal for this. So just to keep in mind in the future, if you're ever, looking around for a projector. A lot of times when you see something like home cinema, right? So they're expecting, and even this next level up, which is expensive, pro cinema, they're expecting that you um, they're expecting that you have a dark environment, right? If we see this word cinema here, it's meant to be projected in a very dark, controlled environment. So these projectors might not hold up as well if there's any ambient light. So that's just something to be aware of. Um, so the next level up, this Pro Cinema 4K. So we can see it's the difference in price is like 4 times as expensive. And just being 4K, so that matters a lot. So this other one was just 1080, so just HD. But for this, it's kind of interesting. We can see if I go to specs, right? So color brightness, white brightness, it's 2400 lumens. So it's actually less lumens than the cheaper model, but this insane contrast ratio up to 200,000 to 1. So that's insane. That's a really, really great contrast ratio. So that's something. So I guess just to highlight the fact that you can't only look at lumens, right? So if we only did that, we would think, oh, well, this projector is better than this one, right? Well, actually, it's lumens and contrast ratio go hand in hand. So this value here tells me that if we had a completely dark space, this projector is the blacks in the image are going to stay really, really dark. And because of that, maybe you don't really need as brightness, right? The contrast between the blackest black and the whitest white in your image is going to look really sharp and a lot of contrast. It's going to really pop. If the contrast ratio is a little bit less, let's say the black is like kind of gray, it's not totally black, in which case you kind of need extra lumens to boost the brightness to make the image look better, right? So these things just go hand in hand. This one is really expensive because it's 4K. So for a 4K projector, this is actually a very good price, I think. And just the kind of like fetishize about having like too much money someday. This Panasonic model is like a refrigerator size. It's huge. 4K large venue. The Panasonic site here doesn't even have a price, but I looked up elsewhere, and there's various prices, and the cheapest of which was $175,000. So this would be for, right, if you're running a large music venue or a large cinema venue or whatever. And so this one is insane. It's got 50,000 lumens and a 20,000 to 1 contrast ratio. So again, this is kind of interesting. The cinema one, this huge contrast ratio with less lumens. This obscenely expensive projector has an obscene amount of lumens and almost the same contrast ratio as this one up here. That's very cheap. So it's kind of interesting how you go back and forth between these things. This type, like a large projector like this, large venue projector, it's meant to withstand more ambient light. So sometimes, like with some of the Raphael Lozano Hemmer pieces we've seen that are outside, maybe big projection mapping pieces that are on a facade of a building, right? Public art projections outside. You have ambient lights that you just can't really control sometimes. So this type of projector is really good for that because you need the brute force of having lots of lumens if you have ambient light. For something like this, it's meant to be in a 100% dark cinema space. Therefore, you don't need as much brute force. You don't need it to be as bright because the space is really dark. So that's something to be aware of also, right? So if you know that you can have a 100% dark space, maybe you can afford to have fewer lumens, or vice versa. If you want to be projecting something outside or a place that has a lot of ambient light, then you're like, okay, I think I need more lumens then. If there's ambient light, a really high contrast ratio doesn't help you as much because the blackest blacks in your image are going to be kind of lightened by the ambient light that's in that space. So, quick overview of what those things mean. If you can get your hands on one of these projectors, then please let me borrow it because I would love to use it. So keep me posted. Thanks.